It has become an important custom each year at our Kol Nidre service to invite members of our community to share a personal reflection on a theme that broadly relates to the High Holy Day period or to Yom Kippur specifically. On this day, perhaps more than any other holy day in our calendar, it is critical to be able to make a personal connection between the words and the themes of our tradition and the lived experience that we know with our own hearts and minds. It is a great blessing for us that we have always had members who are willing to step forward and share some of their thoughts on an aspect of the High Holy Day period that engages them in either a challenging or an inspiring way. These words help us all to put our own lives in better perspective and to more deeply connect with the transformational promise of this time of year. This year, as we are still in this moment of dealing with the situation of COVID-19, we are going to once again have a single speaker this evening in contrast to our pre-COVID practice, which was to have two members speak at this moment. I have invited one Koheleth member through the prism of her own experience to reflect on a theme of Torah from her life. The term Torah can be seen both as the specifically Jewish framework for the pursuit of wisdom and holiness in our lives, and also as a Jewish designation for wisdom in general in the world at large. So speaking about the Torah from one's life could involve a person's unfolding relationship to Jewish tradition, or it could be seen as the wisdom one has gleaned through all of one's life experience, or some combination of the two. As is our custom, I have left it up to this evening's speaker to decide which of these directions she prefers to take. I'm pleased now to invite Leah Kamiankowski to come forward and share some of her reflections on this question.
So Rabbi Steve asked me to talk about what I thought. Rabbi Steve asked me to talk about what I understood as my Jewish identity, my Jewish journey. As the years have gone by, I have been through many changes in my Jewish experience. And each one brought an additional layer of meaning to my Jewish identity. My parents immigrated from shtetls in Eastern Europe to Argentina, where my brother and I were born. We were part of the first generation of Jews born in South America. Although my parents and their contemporaries were raised in traditional homes, most of the Jewish immigrants that came to Argentina became practically secular Jews. They spoke Yiddish, and that kept them together as a community. We went to shul only for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which was a place to show off one's new clothes, and of course with a matching purse and gloves and shoes. It was the biggest fashion show of the year. We were not taught the prayers and did not participate in the service. The women were upstairs, the men were downstairs, the children played in the patio, and the teenagers hung out at another part of the patio. And of course, there was no reference at all to Elul and the traditional month of introspection. We knew that Rosh Hashanah was the beginning of the year, and that Yom Kippur was a day of forgiveness rather than the Day of Atonement. I do remember, though, that many people fasted. We had Passover Seder every year. My uncle read the Haggadah in Hebrew. Children were to be very quiet, and we didn't know what on earth was going on. As children, we were not included in the proceedings. We just had to sit quietly and behave properly. We celebrated Purim with a big formal ball, which was a beauty pageant, and a Queen Esther was crowned every year. That was our experience of Jewish life. When our parents talked to us about our history and traditions, what we heard mostly was an account of the tragic history of the Jewish people. The pogroms, the Inquisition, all the persecutions, and of course the Holocaust. It was a lachrymose conception of Jewish history. It was all true, but it was not all there was. We knew nothing about the rich culture that had developed during the exile, nothing about the Jewish sages and philosophers, or the rich literature, nothing of what was good and positive and uplifting. So naturally, our identification as Jews was born out of negative feelings towards the outside world and was not based on positive feelings towards our historical or religious past. As young people growing up in that environment, it was natural for us to turn away from this history and past and espouse ideals of a vibrant life, of accomplishments that would fill us with pride. Zionism provided us with such an ideal. The book was not the Torah. It was Herzl and the history of Zionism. Had it not been for the Zionist ideal, we might have had great difficulty in finding a meaningful area of Jewish identification. As young Zionists, we looked to eliminate from our history everything that had happened in almost 2,000 years of exile and go from the biblical past, from ancient life in the homeland, directly into the future, our homeland. We lacked identification with Jewish religion or with the spiritual values. When we came to the States, we found out that if one wanted to have a Jewish life, one had to join a synagogue, not a Jewish cultural institution. So, we joined a large conservative synagogue where I never felt a connection to the religious services or to other members. I remember that people were chastised if they prayed aloud because it interfered with the experience of listening to a professional choir. When I became single, I stopped going there and spent the high holidays out in the park with a friend. One summer, I encountered a Reconstructionist Jew and heard a new way of thinking about religion. I searched for a Reconstructionist community in Cleveland and found this little group, maybe 15 people, and a rabbi that did not wear a flashy black robe. The group did not have high holiday services other than Tashlich, so I was invited to come to Tashlich on Rosh Hashanah afternoon. That day, my life changed. That day, I discovered a Judaism that was full of meaning, a Judaism with which I could connect, a Judaism that touched my heart, my soul, and my intellect, a Judaism that would open up a whole new world to me. Rabbi Jeffrey Shine read some prayers and then said we would cast our sins into the water. So I started to think about personal sins that I needed to reckon with. And then I heard Jeffrey saying that we would go through the alphabet, and then heard members saying words like arrogance, bigotry, cruelty, gossip, hatred, hunger, indifference, prejudice, racism, and more. That was religion? If so, it was a religion I could identify with. That was not getting all dressed up to go to shul as we did in Argentina. That was not my previous synagogue with its impersonal service. I just stood there in a state of awe. I was then in my 50s, and it was the first time in my life that I felt deeply touched by a religious service. I have been saying ever since that day that on that day I fell in love with the Reconstructionist Haburah and with the Reconstructionist philosophy. And that is a love has continued to grow for 30 years. I have always found it difficult to relate to the world of miracles and the conception of the biblical God. I had seen the Torah only as a wonderful collection of myths and stories, but not a book to live by. That day I learned that the tradition had values that I definitely could and would want to live by. When I come to services, more often than not, I don't chant the prayers. I close my eyes and listen. And in the sounds, I hear the people who are praying at the same time in many other synagogues all over the world. I also hear the grandparents I never knew, the shtetl, the patriarchs, the Israelites in Babylonia, the Jews of the Middle Ages, the whole history behind me. And I also feel a deep connection to those who will follow us and with what we can create and leave for future generations of Jews. My involvement with Kol Halev and the Reconstructionist movement truly changed my life. The Kol Halev community has been feeding my soul for 30 years. And for that, I am infinitely grateful.